Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 85. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we have a Singing in the Rain team. Now, Politoed is obviously going to be setting up our rain, and it's also going to be doing our singing because we are going to have our first official Parish Trap team in the 128 teams challenge. And the basic idea of Parish Trap is that by using the move Parish Song, you can hopefully get rid of 2 Pokemon very early on, or you could trap in 2 Pokemon by using Gothitel's Shadow Tag, and you go for the Parish Song, and then you stall for the 3 turns for as long as you can, and then you get rid of 2 Pokemon immediately, and then hopefully your other 2 Pokemon that you bring other than Politoed and Gothitelle are able to clean up in the back, or just take 2 Pokemon out at the very start. And it's a lot easier to do this with Rain because you can afford to be a lot more aggressive with your Rain pieces. But starting off with our actual Politoed, we are also going to be using the Weather Ball on Politoed just for some consistent water type damage, unless our Rain isn't up, in which case we're not going to be getting consistent water type damage. We're going to be getting fire type damage or ice type damage or rock type damage. But the Weather Ball is not so much here to be our main water source of output. That's Basculegion's job. But the Weather Ball isn't here to be our main water damage output. That's Basculegion's job. The Weather Ball is just kind of here to maybe get like a Focus Sash every now and again, or pick up a 2-hit KO on a frail Pokemon. But we also have the Haze on Politoed in case Pokemon are trying to build up their stats in front of Politoed during the 3 turns that we're trying to stall for our Perish Song to take them out. We can haze them away. Or if it's like Dondozo, for example, we can haze away the Dondozo stats to make it more dealable. As well as we have the leftovers on Politoed so that we can get health over time while we're Protect stalling, and we are Terra Grass so that we are not affected by powder moves, the most notable one probably being put to sleep by Spore. Next up we got Gothitelle, and I didn't realize, but this is actually the first team that we're using Gothitelle on because we've used Dugtrio and Diglett previously every time. But Gothitel's Shadow Tag is a little bit different from Arena Trap because it allows you to stop every Pokemon from switching out, not just Pokemon that are on the ground. Unless, of course, it's like a Ghost type, because Ghost types have a natural immunity to being trapped in. But our Gothitelle is hopefully going to be stalling with Fake Out, and we also have the Heal Pulse for side healing up any of our Pokemon in case they need a little bit of health just to survive an extra turn or so. And we have the Light Screen to make it so that we take special hits a little bit better, as well as we have the Agua Berry to give us a little bit of extra health, and the Terra Dark makes us resistant to the 2 types that we were previously weak to, and it allows us to avoid being pranked or taunted. Next up we got Electrode here, and I decided to slot on Electrode so that we can get a lot of very fast, hard-hitting electric type damage, as we have the Thunder and the Volt Switch in order to help us pivot, and Thunder will be 100% accurate because we're in Rain. We also have the Electro Web just for a little bit of speed control for some of our mid-speed Pokemon that maybe we won't have the Rain up at the time for. And then we also have Hisuian Electrode's signature move, the Chloroblast, which is a very, very strong move that will just cause us to lose 50% of our max HP, but if you're using it twice and taking out 2 Pokemon, then it is a very worthy trade-off, or even just taking out 1 Pokemon with the Chloroblast. It really is nice to hit with the Chloroblast. And another benefit of using Electrode is that we are soundproof, which means that we will not be getting affected by our own Perish Trap, so we can lead Electrode and Politoed, and in case the 2 Pokemon in the back can't leave, we can maybe use the Volt Switch in order to Volt Switch out Electrode to bring in Gothitelle, and then go for the Perish Song with Politoed, which would buy Gothitelle an extra turn to Fake Out and Protect. And or if the opponent thinks that we're going to Volt Switch out with Electrode, we can actually choose to go for another one of our damaging moves in like Thunder or Chloroblast, and then switch out Electrode manually on the next turn. Next up, we got Basculegion, and Basculegion is going to be our heavy brain damage here, as we have the Swift Swim in order to increase our speed, and we're going with the Life Orb just to boost the power of our damaging moves, and hopefully we're going to be picking up some one-hit KOs, as we have the Wave Crash just to be really strong water-type damage at the cost of dealing some recoil to ourselves, and we have the Phantom Force in case we also need to stall turns while the Perish Trap is happening, and Phantom Force is probably one of our better Ghost-type moves to be using on Basculegion, as well as I decided to slot on the Crunch because we are Terra Dark, so we'll be getting a boost for the Crunch whenever we go for it. And since we're not a choice item on Basculegion, we have Protect to just help stalling during the Perish turns. Here we got our second Swift Swim Mon, which is going to be Overquill, and Overquill obviously has a lot of different things than Basculegion here, because Overquill is going to be our choice span Mon, hopefully dealing a lot of damage very fast with the Swift Swim, but Overquill is gonna be self-destructing hopefully, and we want to use Overquill either with Basculegion, because Basculegion is Ghost type, so we won't be getting hit by it, one of our two Protect Mons, or you could be using it with Hitmontop, because Hitmontop has the Wide Guard. But basically, if the opponent doesn't lead anything like Intimidate, or they lead something that can't be faster than Overquill, we can go for the Terra Normal Self-Destruct in order to try and take out both of the opponent's Pokemon, and then we can just bring in Politoed to Perish Trap, and since we ideally have 3 Pokemon left at that point, we should just be good to end the game. But in case we don't want to use Overquill as a bomb, we have the consistent Poison Jab and Crunch Stabs, and since we are using the Rain, we have the Liquidation, which will be boosted by it, but also gives us the ability to hit Fire, Rock, Ground types, all that good stuff. And last but not least on the team, we have Hitmontop, who is going to be our Intimidate Pokemon, helping Politoed stay on the field for longer, because we're reducing the damage that physical attackers are dealing ideally. But Hitmontop itself has some stall components, as we have the Fake Out, just like Gothitelle does, in order to stall for a bit in doubles, and we have just 2 damaging moves in our Stab Close Combat to perhaps take out like a Steel or a Dark type with Hitmontop, and we have the Ice Spinner just in case we want to get rid of the opponent's terrain, in case they're like an Expanding Force team. We can use the Focus Sash on Hitmontop in case we don't feel like wide guarding out the Expanding Force, and then Ice Spinner it away so that they can't go for Expanding Force again. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the Wide Guard on Hitmontop to make it so that not only are we not getting hit by Overquill Self-Destruct, it also means that if the opponent decides to lock in a spread move with one of their Choice Scarf Mons or something like that, and we have Politoed and Hitmontop left, that we basically just win the game, because hopefully Politoed is the slowest on the field for the Perish Song to work, and then once we've Wide Guarded, the opponent can no longer hit us. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so first up we have a team with a pretty standard spread of Mons here. You know, all of these Mons are pretty top in their fields, at least some way. Sneasler, Rillaboom, and Incineroar. You don't really need me to explain to you what any of these Pokemon do. But the big thing on this team is Golden Go is a really good win con for them, because not only is Golden Go a Ghost type, meaning that it can't be trapped by Gothitelle, its ability Good as Gold also means that it can't be Perish Song, so we're going to have to deal with it some other way. But we lead the Electrode and Gothitelle here, as the opponent leads Sneasler and Incineroar, so not the greatest lead for us, perhaps. I Fake Out Incineroar because if one of their Mons is going to Fake Out, we're not going to be outspeeding the Sneasler, but we might be outspeeding the Incineroar, but the Incineroar's Flare Blitz is more likely to KO Electrode than the Dire Claw is from Sneasler, but it seems like neither of the opponent's Pokemon decide to go for the Fake Out, so we just get a free Electro Web into both, as they do go for the Dire Claw and they critical hit Electrode. So actually my previous assumption was wrong there, but now we get to bring in the Overquill for free, and it's super slow, so it gets to move before even Sneasler, as Sneasler goes for the Close Combat, which does quite a bit of damage to Overquill, but we took out Incineroar with the Liquidation. Now we bring in Politoed in the back in order to activate the Swift Swim on Overquill, and we get that Liquidation KO into the Sneasler, as now the opponent brings in their Rillaboom that they have in the back, and we switch back into Gothitelle here in order to Terra Grass our Politoed, just because I figured that they were going to use Dragonite to try and extreme speed Overquill, and the fact that we have Overquill in the back gives us another switch in turn later in case we need it. But Terra Grassing our Politoed makes it so that we can take the Grassy Glide pretty okay here, and Politoed gets off the Perish Song for the last 2 Pokemon that are on the field on the opponent's side, and since we're Terra Grass Politoed, I'm feeling pretty good. We get a Fake Out into Rillaboom here, and the opponent does miss the Scale Shot into Politoed, but I very much doubt that matters, as we just get the Weather Ball chip into Dragonite, because I didn't want to start protecting quite yet. It was a bit of a risky play, but I knew I could get the Fake Out into Rillaboom, and that would be the component that probably deals the most damage into Politoed, because they might have the U-turn. But the opponent decides to forfeit, seeing as that they have 2 turns of the trap left, and we still have 3 Pokemon, and Politoed can afford to protect next turn, and we're pretty good to win here. Up next, we have what looks to be a bit of an aggressive Trick Room team here, as they do have the Porygon 2 to set up their Trick Room, but they have the Indeedee male instead of the Indeedee female for going for their expanding forces with Armor Rouge. So we lead Basculegion and Gothitelle here, and the opponent leads Annihilate and Dragonite. And I figured Annihilate was going to go for the final Gambit, as it kind of looked more like a Choice Scarf Annihilate here, and I wanted to see if the Dragonite was multi-scale or not. So they do final Gambit into Gothitelle, and we tried crunching Dragonite, but we don't get to crunch Dragonite. And they try extreme speeding Basculegion here, not quite sure why. But we trade Gothitelle for their Annihilate as we get the crunch into Dragonite and deal some Life Orb damage into ourselves. But now we can bring in Hitmontop, who intimidates Dragonite, so we see that this is in fact a multi-scale Dragonite, so it's good that with using the crunch we were able to break the multi-scale at least. But I Wide Guard with Hitmontop here because I didn't want Indeedee to just click Expanding Force into both of our Mons, and the Dragonite clicks the Scale Shot, but thankfully because we intimidated it, it's not doing it enough to Hitmontop to where it is able to KO it. But Dragonite does decrease its defense, and it goes for a Protect on the next turn, perhaps not wanting to get hit by Basculegion's Phantom Force, but that's not how Phantom Force works, it just gets taken out by the Phantom Force, and Indeedee goes for the Trick Room here for Armor Rouge. But we feel pretty safe here. The Armor Rouge does go for Meteor Beam, and it might have taken out Basculegion. Kind of hard to say here, but they decided to go for the Meteor Beam into Hitmontop anyways to try and take it out, seeing as maybe their Indeedee only has like Expanding Force and Dazzling Gleam in order to hit us, since they are using a slot for Trick Room. But because of this, we can just Wave Crash into Armor Rouge here in order to take it out, and it's only Indeedee left on the field, still trying to click the Expanding Force. So we just Wide Guard out the Indeedee, and it is Sash, so it gets to live another turn as we crunched it there, but it's... I mean, I guess if it had Protect, it could be Protect stalling out its own Psychic Terrain in order to make the Expanding Force a single target attack, but whenever that happens, we just click attacking moves with both of our Pokemon, and Indeedee can't take out both of our Pokemon at the same time anymore. Now we've got another Golden Goat team, but they also have the ability to be really tanky with like their Ninetales, Aurora Veil, setting up the Snow for Archaludon, who can just be really tanky, and Breloom could be like Loaded Dice Bullet Seed for Archaludon, and Kilowattrel is... I don't know what the Kilowattrel is really doing here, maybe it's just the Tailwind component. We start with Overquill and Gothitelle as the opponent starts Kilowattrel and Goldango, and I immediately swapped into Politoed here because I wanted to get this Swift Swim for Overquill so that I can guaranteed outspeed the Kilowattrel, because I figured that they were going to try and play like either a Steel Terror with their Goldango here in order to try and save it from the Overquill, but they don't do that, so we just full on crunch into Kilowattrel, and they try Shadow Balling into what was previously Gothitelle, but Politoed takes it super good. But now they get to bring in Ninetales in order to change their Snow here, and they get up their Aurora Veil and a Nasty Paw with Goldango, so I'm kind of regretting protecting with Politoed because I thought that they might try to attack into the slot, since I would like to bring in Gothitelle in order to bring back in Politoed in order to set the weather back in my favor. But they just decide to take a setup turn, and the crunch nearly KOs the Goldango, but doesn't get the KO. And the Goldango is leftover, so it's at least kind of tanky. But now I do the play where I swap in Gothitelle, and they decide to protect Goldango. And they try Freeze Drying into Politoed, but Gothitelle is neutral to the Freeze Dry. And now we just bring back in Politoed in order to regain the weather control. And the Ninetales decides to protect here, but we just get the crunch into the Goldango in order to completely take it out. As now they bring in Farigiraf, and we get to crunch into that too, which doesn't quite take it out. It must be a pretty defensive draft there. But now Politoed gets off the Perish Song, which means that since we have all 4 Pokemon left at this point, and one of them is Gothitelle, who once we take out the Farigiraf, will be able to click Fake Out into the Ninetales, we're just going to be good to win. Like, there's not really much the opponent can do at this point, except maybe for pray for like super blizzard crit freezes. We can even just use Basculegion here to just Wave Crash into the Ninetales since we regained the weather control. Here we've got a bit of a mixed weather team. I wasn't really quite sure what to make out about this, other than that I needed to lead for both like Torkoal Typhlosion Sun and Pelipper Archaludon Rain, and Mousehold side attacking into Archaludon, maybe also Rain. It's a lot of openings on this team. So we try our best. They lead Pelipper and Mousehold here, which is pretty nice for us because we lead Electrode and Politoed here. As I thought that what they were going to do is to, seeing as I had Electrode on the field, swap Pelipper into Archaludon and then try to go for the side beat up into Archaludon. But so I try to target down Mousehold, but unfortunately the opponent just decides to get up their Tailwind with Pelipper, meaning Pelipper gets to maintain its Focus Sash here, as now Archaludon is the one to come in and goes for the side population bomb into Archaludon with the Mousehold. So this is going to take a while, obviously, but the play so far is not going as expected. They have both Tailwind and a fully set up Archaludon, which is not great for us, admittedly. But we get to Volt Switch on the Archaludon there, as now we bring in Gothitelle in order to trap it, and we Weather Ball into the mouse, which does pick up a critical hit, but that crit doesn't matter in the grand scheme of the game at all. We fake out Archaludon in order to make it unable to move, and they do go for Population Bomb into Gothitelle, and this is where this game gets kind of ugly, because originally I had the wrong berry on Gothitelle, so Gothitelle eats it and gets confused instead of restoring HP, which was definitely very important. But at least Politoed gets to Haze in front of the Archaludon there. Now we bring in Electrode, seeing as there's probably going to be an Electro Shot going into that slot, and the Mousehold tries to Population Bomb finish off Gothitelle, but thankfully Gothitelle gets off the Protect, and Electrode takes very little damage from the Electro Shot, so Mousehold gets taken out, so now they can't side Population Bomb there, and their Tailwind has run out, so I tried Electro Webbing into the Pelipper in order to just break its Sash / make it slower than the Gothitelle, but Gothitelle gets up the light screen at least, as the Archaludon goes for the Electro Shot, and it finds the KO because it gets a critical hit. So again, not really up to our favor there. I bring back Politoed just because I want to bring back the rain for Basculegion to get off the Phantom Force pretty quickly, as Archaludon goes for the Body Press into what was previously Electrode. Now we bring Electrode back in again, as the Basculegion gets off the Phantom Force, dealing some chip into the Archaludon, and Electrode takes the Hurricane because of the light screen. Electro Shot comes out into Electrode, and Electrode takes it, thankfully, because it resisted, and now we're going Terra Electric on Electrode in order to try and get rid of the Archaludon here. Thankfully, Pelipper protects, perhaps reading that it could have gotten doubled this turn because of the Electro Web, but we just go for the Thunder into Archaludon, and with Wave Crash damage, we pick up KO there. And I wanted to stall out their Tailwind, so we protect and then swap in Politoed, because Politoed is less important, and we can maybe use it in order to try and get off the trap here, but the superpower from the Malamar does just enough damage to bring Politoed into 2-ko, despite the fact that superpower increased Malamar's attack, and we Wave Crash Malamar, but it gets to live there because of its defense boost, and they Hurricane Politoed, but Politoed lives and gets confused, and we see the Malamar knockoff into Basculegion, as now Politoed gets off the Perish Song, but that's not important here, as now we get to bring it back in Electrode, and as long as Politoed doesn't hit itself in confusion, we can go for that Electro Web, and thankfully the Malamar died to the Electro Web, because if it didn't, it would have gotten a speed increase from the Electro Web. But with our Specs and Terra Electric, the Electro Web picks up KO there, and it brings Pelipper down to Sash, and Pelipper is not slower than the Politoed there, but Politoed is not confused, so it gets to go for the normal Weather Ball and do the last bit of damage into Pelipper. And lastly, we have what looks to be a pretty tanky Trick Room setup, as all of these pieces have the ability to stall for a really long time, as Snorlax can do like belly drum things and then start hitting the opponent under Trick Room, and Archaludon and Ursaluna Blood Moon both have their unique tankiness to them. The game starts off and we lead Electrode and Overquill here into their Armarouge and Indeedee, and this allows us to Volt Switch out with Electrode into the Politoed that we have in the back here, which makes it very difficult for Armarouge to touch the Overquill if it wanted to this turn. But the Armarouge makes the sensible play, which is just to set up its Trick Room for its other Pokemon that it has in the back, as now we see Archaludon hit the floor, and we protect with Politoed, as I didn't want an Electro Shot going into the Archaludon, even though they don't have a rain of their own. They could be Power Herb Electro Shot, but because the Armarouge clicked the Expanding Force, it's not going to affect Overquill, and we actually see a Thunder go into Politoed, which is a little bit crazier than the Electro Shot, but the Crunch, that crit did not matter on the Armarouge. It's always going to pick up KO there with the super effective Band, and now we just have to get Politoed to survive this turn, as we see the Snorlax has horsepower and it tries to go for it into the Overquill, but thankfully we went into Electrode, who's at least neutral. And Politoed is now terrestrialized into a grass type, so we resist the Thunder, and Politoed got off the Perish Song, so now we just need to stall the turns in order for that to take effect against these two rather tanky Pokemon. And I tried hazing just in case the Snorlax did in fact go for the Belly Drum under the last few turns of Trick Room, and thankfully Politoed is slower than the Archaludon because the Archaludon goes for Draco Meteor here, so it gets its special attack reduced, pretty much taking it out of the game here unless we attacked it in order to activate its body presses. But we bring in Basculegion here in order to go for the double protect, and now that we've double protected, the opponent has no way to beat us because we have one Pokemon in the back, which is Overquill, and both of the opponent's Pokemon will perish on the next turn. So we swap in Overquill here so that now Politoed is the Pokemon left in the back, and even though Snorlax tries to protect, it's going to perish at the end of the turn. So yeah, that was the Singing in the Rain team, and admittedly, I'm not the biggest Perish Trap player. Like, I get how Perish Trap works, I just don't get the finer nuances of, like, when to switch Pokemon or when you can afford to fake out, and it's probably something that I mechanically just don't know about competitive Pokemon that much. But there are obviously people who are, like, dedicated Perish Trap players or really like playing Perish Trap, so... And it's a lot easier to run Perish Trap in lower power formats because it's harder for the opposing Pokemon to KO you, specifically Gothitelle. But I don't know if I would go as far as to say that Regate is a format where the Perish Trap can thrive, as more often than not, Gothitelle just kind of feels like a Pokemon that's trapped in there with the opponents rather than the opponents being trapped in there with Gothitelle. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video and even consider subscribing, because both of those things will help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.